And aloha, everyone. Thank you for joining our discussion today. And just to dive in and get started, give you a little background on me. So my name is Craig Hobbs, and I'm one of the solution consultants here at Rundeck, where I spend most of my time working with our community users and our enterprise users to solve complex problems related to automation and incident response. So really anywhere where Rundeck is being deployed, I am one of the excited resources to come on and help our users. So please reach out to me. I will work for coffee or any other minor swag gifts that I can possibly get to help out with anything and any questions you may have. I've been working for the last few years in software automation, integration, as well as observability and monitoring. So really kind of applying that broad experience to all the different areas of self-service automation and SRE concepts. So today we're going to take a look at really that case for self-service automation as it applies to the SRE concepts and principles. So I've had a chance to work across a few really great SRE teams and introduce them to some of the benefits of Runbook automation through Rundeck. And in addition to that, we'll take a look at some of the challenges and opportunities that I've seen as I've worked across on some of these cases with the teams, and then how that self-service automation can be charged up through Rundeck and really enable those SRE teams' concepts and principles. We'll do a quick demo and leave some time for some Q&A to continue to expand on use cases and concepts. So let's go ahead and dive in. And I always open with the webinar stats. So every webinar I've been on or webinars I do, they always open with the webinar stats. So our stat today comes to us from Gartner and really related to the idea of automation. So this comes from Gartner's 2021 predictions on automation. And actually Gartner had an opening prediction around automation in 2020. So they basically begin to double down on it. And they see this as one of the key trends evolving, and that's this idea of hyper automation. But what really grabbed me about the stat and the quote from Gartner wasn't the idea that hyper automation is going to be driving down operational cost or wasn't going to be an important trend in the coming year. I think that's something everyone is seeing. It was really the idea of the operational process. And it was the combination of the two. And that's what I really kind of pulled out of this factoid and quote from them, that the combination of automation and operational process is going to actually drive down that cost and really give you the boost and benefit. So kind of taking this as the guiding principle, I looked and I spoke with some of our SRE teams and customers, and the idea of automating everything is the answer. It is a guiding principle in the SRE role. It has been there long before Gartner ever put forth their hyper automation quote. The idea of automating away manual task, automating away repetitive tasks, toil. Also, that can be measured in the SRE world is a concept older than Gartner's quotes. So that came as no new surprise to the SRE teams. However, the idea of how that automation gets applied, the application of it and how it becomes a force multiplier, not only for the SRE team, but across the organization, was really the proactive view that I found great SRE teams taking a look at. So every good SRE team has their automation, but the great ones were really trying to understand how this thoughtful application of automation was really going to affect not just their team, but the organization as a whole. And especially as the service grows and especially as their needs grow, how do we put this automation into effect? And really, where's the management of this automation? You don't want it to necessarily land in the lap of the SRE team, but I do want the SRE team to apply their guiding principles. I do want them to apply their security focus. I do want them to apply their guidelines and standards, because they are setting the standards for the system reliability, the service application, all of this. But we do want to be able to democratize these types of automations and move them about the organization. So that's really where I saw these great SRE teams sitting and how they were looking at automation, not just another tool or link in their tool chain. As I kind of continued talking with some of our customers and their SRE teams, I saw this one developing use case, and I saw it in actually a couple of different instances. And this may be a use case many SRE teams are used to, and that's customer care team. On one side of the wall, you have your customer care team, who are the front line for your customers. So there's no doubt about the value of customer experience and the speed of delivering on customer request. But on the other side of the wall, you have your SRE team. and they're busy working on their incident responses, they're on call, the service uptime and availability, as well as the growth of the service and release of new products, new versions, new features. They have so much going on. But when a request then comes in from the customer success team and the customer care team, it's immediate. It has to be completely reacted to in the fastest possible time, even if it's a trivial task. So we're talking about tasks like changing passwords. My file's been deleted. I just need to get access to these log files so I can understand what the customer is actually saying to me, so I can further back up the case for what they need done. All of these and more string together for the customer success team, and again, start to turn my SRE team into that glorified DevOps response team or IT response team, where they're just giving answers to the customer success team. And the SRE team really has so many other objectives and measurements that they have to perform to ultimately increase the reliability of the service. So that really kind of brings them into that motion of what do they really need to do as far as automation. Again, that thoughtful idea of how to approach automation and apply it in a way that allows them to break down the organizational silos. How can they get rid of some of these manual tasks, but get rid of them in a way that makes them more open and active for other members of the organization, with always applying a security first approach. So automating the tools, using the tools, really great, but how do you apply a security first approach with the various tools that you're using from legacy, from some of the new, more modernized tools available in the cloud, working with microservices? The journey of putting together an automation tool set that can be self-managed and self-applied across organizations is really that view now that I'm working with those SRE teams. And these are the challenges that they're considering on a day-over-day basis as they're looking at their tool chain. So as I kind of continue to dive into them, this really is what became the case for that self-service automation. And so when we talk about self-service automation, it's the idea now of saying that we have thoughtful automation, that it's just not being applied for the idea that automation is the answer, but how can it really help my team reduce some of the burden and empower some of these organizational teams at the same time? And while I'm empowering these organizations to go out and self-service, I still want to be able to apply some of the guiding principles that we've set up as the SRE team. Guiding principles around security, guiding principles around reliability, guiding principles around repeatability. Can I measure the effects of this type of automation and how impactful it's being? And can I produce something and use the current tool chain I already have? Do I have to throw away anything that I've already automated? Can I reuse what I've already had? And finally, can it continue to scale with my operations? The great SRE teams know that the challenge is this big today. Tomorrow, it'll be double as requests and the popularity of the service increases. And that's really when we start to take the conversation down Runbook automation and really taking a look at where Rundeck can fit into this challenge for them. So with Rundeck, we're able to take that challenge of self-service automation, take all of those legacy tools, take all of the modern tools and the automation components in their tool chain, and bring them all into this centralized managed area, where now the SREs can apply their standards for process, execution, security, and give access to the wide variety of organizations and silos within that organization to be able to self-service. So now not just my customer care team, but my IT team, my dev team, everything that they would need to do within my environment, whether that environment lies in the cloud or on-prem, no matter where, maybe that's my network gear, whatever they need to get access to, be it through a deployment, be it through troubleshooting, be it through some other trivial minor access, but critical to their organization, I now as the SRE can set the standard for this, for deployment, and allow them to gain access to these systems and make them secure, auditable, and easy to run. So that's really where Rundeck enters into this self-service automation story for those SRE teams, and really kind of helping navigate, some of the mini environments that we work through. So I kind of talked about the tool chain and how widespread it is. So when I would go in and talk to the SRE teams, they talk about everything in the tool chain. And that's a real advantage of Rundeck, because with Rundeck, you don't have to change your tool set. You don't have to update that. Rundeck can take your tools and tool chains as is and centralize that execution and really glue them together so that you're able to move them around. So as you think about continuing to grow, and you're going to be adding new tools as they go, saying that there's not a one size fits all for the SRE team, you want something that will allow you to bring in whatever tool set that you are using. And that is where Rundeck really begins to give you that centralized orchestration of all of these tool sets and their execution, while at the same time providing a complete trace history and security for running and accessing these tools. So with that, I sat with the SRE teams and kind of talked about that idea of their practices and where Rundeck will help them by providing this self-service automation. So everything you see on the screen, from reducing toil to breaking down those organizational silos. Now with Rundeck, you can have them come in securely, execute these automations, these tasks without sacrificing any of your principles. All of that toil, that manual task of resetting users or getting logs or even redeploying applications, you can push that off onto those teams in a way that's now managed by them without giving up control. And then kind of talking about other areas of change. With Rundeck, you can gradually move these changes out, so it doesn't impact your organization in one swoop of taking out or swapping and replacing. You can simply use the tools you have and step out with each task that you want to roll out to these organizations. So that's kind of the journey that I've been on since I've been working with so many, a wide variety of SRE teams and their automation journey. And this is just the start. There's so many different ways that then automation spreads out and starts to impact the organization. But this was a way for them to get started with a lot of self-service automation and put the management of that on those different silos. So now what I want to do is actually switch gears and showcase a little bit of Rundeck, get into that use case that I talked a little bit about, and kind of give an example as I was working through with some of the teams. So I'm actually in Rundeck and kind of working through the Rundeck example. So if you're familiar with Rundeck, kind of coming into Rundeck, having that set up. So I'm going to play the role of my SRE team, and I will only play one on TV because I believe the SREs have so much great skill set and background to them. I will just simply play one in practice here. So as I kind of come in, and if you're familiar with Rundeck, I have the ability here on the left-hand side to click on the Jobs tab. And what the Jobs tab will now do is showcase to me all the different jobs that I have configured. So again, imagining myself now as the SRE, I've configured these different jobs within Rundeck. They may be taking advantage of different tool sets in your chain, from Ansible to Terraform to just a simple series of scripts of Python or PowerShell. I've now centralized all those executions here from the Rundeck interface. And I've actually grouped them together to make them a lot easier for me to use. So I have my Kubernetes services here. I have my troubleshooting services here. And as the SRE, I've defined all the various security for accessing these systems. I trust myself as I'm the SRE and I know what all of these systems do. So I have some services here to create new deployments in my Kubernetes service. If I actually went into this, I could actually see the actual creation of my Kubernetes service if I like. And I could look at the details of creating my service. So I'm actually going to go into my Rundeck job here and just look at the definition. So what I'm actually seeing in this definition is that I, as the SRE, I've actually created a Rundeck job that is a workflow. And a Rundeck job workflow is a series of commands and steps that are executed as part of one single job. So as part of one single job, I may have a multi-step process that can include hundreds of different steps, or in this case, it just happens to have two. And it's leveraging some of the built-in Rundeck plugins, convenience plugins for working with the variety of systems we talked about. So in this case, we have a built-in Rundeck plugin for working with Kubernetes. We have plugins for working with AWS, working with Azure, working with other components of authorization and access via Windows or Linux. Anywhere you have devices or services or VMs, Rundeck has plugins and access components for you to authenticate and run jobs. So in this particular case, I have a very simple service that I've defined as the SRE. I'm actually deploying the very familiar Hello World Kubernetes application into my environment. I've defined a few of the convenience methods here that are available within Rundeck, so I don't go and build this all out from my standpoint. But again, as an SRE, I'm completely fine with that. So I could actually go ahead now and run this. And what will take place in the background is that workflow step that I've defined will access my Kubernetes environment, my Kubernetes cluster, do a deployment of that particular application. If I actually want to see that application, I could come over to my setup here. And if I actually click hello world, it's just that fast. And it's just a really simple application. It just kind of puts out hello world. So now as the SRE, I can actually continue to go through. I have access to many other jobs here. I can actually delete deployments. I can actually get information about my Kubernetes environment. This could all be parameterized so that I can pass in parameters. In this case, I'm looking at my Kubernetes environment. I'm actually even seeing IP addresses, right? So if you're seeing my IP addresses on the phone, on the web call, you're seeing all my IP addresses. But I, as the SRE, I have access to all of these things. This is exactly what I want. But now what I want to do is to be able to empower those silos. I want to give them that power in management while still imposing the principles and the pillars that I have as the SRE team for security, for reliability, for auditability. So while I don't want to give them the ability to create or destroy, I may want to give them the ability to update. That is one of the common repetitive tasks we're hearing from the customer care team. They need to be able to just quickly update the deployment. I want to give them that ability. I do want them to be able to see certain stats about the Kubernetes deployment. I want them to have certain access to certain troubleshooting techniques. Maybe I don't want them to see particular environment variables, but I want them to see certain processes. They'll need that for troubleshooting. So with that, I'm actually going to switch screens. And in this particular screen, I'm going to log back into Rundeck, but this time I'm going to log in and play the role of my customer care agent. So again, another role I can only play on a webinar because the customer care agents are always so amazingly powerful. So now I've logged back into that same Rundeck instance. Again, welcoming in that customer care agent, ready to get started with automating everything and coming back into my project and into my jobs. But this time I've created a much different view. So from my view as the SRE, as one of the SRE engineers, I've now provided that customer care agent with access to just that they need to be able to execute to run their job. I've now empowered them in a way that lets them execute the proper commands that I have designed and do it in a way that provides security guardrails against what they can and cannot do. So while I was able to do so much more of the process, while I was able to run commands and see so much more of the various output of my environment in Kubernetes, as the customer care agent, I've still empowered them to do that, but I've removed all that other private information around IP addresses and other information I deem way too sensitive to pass on. But I can still empower them enough to be able to see just those bits that they need to run. So now as the customer care agent, they've received a ticket in. That ticket has now asked them to do an update for the deployed service. I don't want to burden my SRE team with that. Now I have a complete environment within Rundeck that allows them to self-manage. So now I can go into updating a deployment. I can apply a complete description on what this is to do. So I'm guiding the SRE through the process of how they can now go ahead and update their deployment. I've given them a simple web form here in Rundeck. So whether they want to change the number of replicas, add to it, maybe they want to change that message, I'll just change the message to hello, and now they can execute on that. And they can execute on it in a very secure way that only gives them just the ability to run this. They have no login, they have no access, they have no direct access that they can use to do any other commands other than what I've granted them to do in this simple job. I can now see, they can see the output. And if I were the SRE, I could actually come over to the application here again. And if I were in the same application, now I can see I've changed the message to hello and I've deployed that. So as the SRE now, I've helped the customer, I've addressed their needs, I've checked the processes and verified that those processes are up. If there were more information I needed to grab, I've also given my SRE the ability to run troubleshooting performance stats. Again, complete documentation on what this means to them so they're not without an understanding of what they're doing. And again, I can now allow them to run this type of command that actually puts out performance stats. So I can now go check and see the health of what I've actually put out as the customer care agent. And I'm putting out the various commands from top to vmstat, all the things that just I need. Again, one of those trivial, repetitive tasks that you don't need to reach out to your SRE team to get, easy enough to empower. I also, as the SRE setup, can empower the customer care team with additional walkthrough information in Rundeck. So on the side here, Rundeck has the ability to create what we call tours. These tours will take the agent through a series of steps that really introduces them to what they're seeing and how they're working through this. Again, this is that idea for the SREs to be able to empower with their principles. So whether I'm new to Rundeck or maybe just new to customer care troubleshooting, I can now run through this tour, and this tour will explain to me step by step what I'm looking at as the customer care agent. And as I click on the various tabs, it will actually take me through where I need to go and what I need to click to be able to do this. And you can imagine defining different tours for every level for your customer care agents. Maybe they just need some basic Kubernetes training. Great, we could set them up with a Kubernetes training tour. But either way, the idea here being is that now I'm empowering this team to be able to self-serve, self-manage, and do it all securely without having to compromise any of the pieces of my SRE team. So this is the starting point and the starting case for working with self-service automation and Rundeck, and empowering SRE teams to now put these standards into this type of orchestration while leveraging all the tools that you have in your tool chain, be they legacy or some of the more modern cloud native tools. So with that, I do want to bring it back to the team and say a word of thank you for all of the folks that joined our webinar today and went with me on this journey of some of the interesting interactions I'm having with our SRE customers and how they're working to empower their organizations, work through the different silos, and effectively use automation in their organization. So thank you again. And Tracy, toss it back over to you.
Great, thanks, Craig. We did have a question come in via email. It says, can I set up the security in a way to allow agents to roll back deployments?
Yes, so that's also one of the very, again, very open use cases that are available within something like a Rundeck. When you start thinking about what those customer care agents, what those other organizations are trying to accomplish, Rundeck really it opens the door for so many different use cases that you're attacking. Again, it's taking that automation and applying it in a way that now allows it to be more of a force multiplier. So the type of use case that you're talking about for rolling back, the type of use case of rolling back, very common, very easy to set up in Rundeck and parameterize. So when you talk about rolling back, after you've released, now you'll have a release point, and you can say roll back to this point. Again, that goes to those SRE principles of, being highly available, maintaining security and reliability by falling back to a previously known state.